Hello, everybody. My name is Betsy Sewell, and I am the author of this new resource dedicated to building comprehension and writing expertise in older students, most especially students in years 5 to 10. Now, structured literacy is, of course, really important, but what we're finding is a frightening number of students have learnt to adequately decode words but cannot or do not simultaneously think about content. Now, comprehension is a complex activity. It does not automatically follow from skilled decoding. And comprehension needs the attention that we give to decoding. Now, Agility with Sound includes a large range of decodable books for older students, I think about 130 in total, and their purpose is primarily about comprehension. These are some of the components of skilled comprehension. Here's some more. I could probably write another page, but research tells us that it comes down to 4 key areas. Firstly, effortless decoding. If you cannot read the words easily and effortlessly and unconsciously, you cannot give your full attention to comprehension. So figuring out words, including unfamiliar words, needs to be instinctive and effortless. Secondly, vocabulary. Students cannot comprehend text if they do not know the meaning of keywords and cannot figure them out. And very often it is those key words that students don't know the meaning of that carry the main meaning of the sentence. Thirdly, background knowledge, which is quite closely related to vocabulary. Most text assumes some background awareness, which many students simply do not have. And fourthly, comprehension monitoring. Is this making sense? Am I comprehending this? Too many students focused on decoding do not bother or do not know even that they are supposed to make sense of the text. I've added in a 5th one because I think it's really important as students get older and they're coming across academic language, academic sentence structures that they simply do not understand. So let's start with vocabulary. Many students have a very limited vocabulary, which impacts their ability to comprehend. The language of speech is very often very limited. Unfamiliar words are likely to be the chief carriers of meaning in the sentence. On the other hand, reading is the primary route to building vocabulary. So students must develop the skills involved in inferring meaning as they read, inferring meaning from the morphology or the makeup of the word and from context, those inside and outside strategies. But of course, there is a very big place for directly teaching vocabulary, and this should have 2 goals. Firstly, learning the meanings of important words, those function words that they're going to come across often in their reading. And secondly, to develop a fascination with words and language in general. Now, there are now some really good online tools that help students discover new vocabulary, and it's important that they know about those and how to use them. So let's look firstly at the context clues. I will be back, said the man running the bus. Do not go yet. Ben's gran was sitting in the sun. My gran had a little natter. She is such a chatterbox. Now that word natter, it's an old-fashioned word that kids are unlikely to have heard before or know the meaning of, and frankly they don't need to know the meaning of because it's not a word that is in common use. But the skills involved in figuring out that word from context are really important. You can see from that passage that Ben's gran is probably a friend of hers, and a second clue, she is a chatterbox. So what might she do when she comes up to Ben's gran? What does that tell you about what that word natter means? That's from one of the Agility of the Sound books. And then the morphology, those bits of the word that indicate meaning, prefixes, suffixes, and root words. Students should know the meanings of basic suffixes, prefixes, and how they impact meaning. Common prefixes like re and dis and pre and inter and sub, which have one meaning, but there are others like in and so on that may have multiple meanings. And then the suffixes, they may have a specific meaning or relate to parts of speech. So start with react, turn it into reaction, and you've turned it into a noun. Turn it into a reactor, that OR suffix means a person or thing that does something. So a reactor is a thing or person that reacts. Reactive turns it into an adjective. Reactivate turns it into a verb, as does reactivated. Students should be able to garner meaning from familiar parts. There are many root words, and sometimes the link between that root and the meaning of the word is pretty obscure, which doesn't mean they're not worth teaching. Of course they are, but there is this part, this extra skill as well, where I can look at a word like illustrative and I can see illustrate in there. I can see simple in simplify. I can see disaster, or most of it, in disastrous. I can see magnify. I can see ceremony. I can see benefit. Those skills are also important, and it may be a skill that many students will come to rely on. The online tools, these are the ones that I have found the most useful. This one I have read about, but I don't own a device that I can load it onto. It's an Apple Store thing, but I've read some really, really good reviews of it. It gives really simple definitions, easy to understand definitions, common language definitions, with lots of examples of the target word used in a sentence. I have used these two, which do the same thing. Very easy to understand definitions. Most of them give the pronunciation, not all, and you see the target word in a range of sentences. Sometimes it may be 2, sometimes it may be 10 or 12. This one, you can see I'm going backwards, howdyousay.com is a very good device for how is this word pronounced. It has both an English accent and an American accent version. So you come across an unfamiliar word, you can't figure out how to pronounce it. That will tell you how. And then the thesaurus is a wonderful resource for finding a better word. So I want to say big, but I'm sick of saying big. There must be a better word. Look up big in thesaurus.com, and a whole range of words. There might be 40 alternatives, from enormous and monstrous and colossal and so on, and words that are, not quite so big. Those ones, the thesaurus, the howdyousay.com, the Britannia Dictionary, the Cambridge Online Dictionary, are all free. I think the app for the Learner's Dictionary is, I think it's under $10, and I would suggest it's probably worth a teacher having it and having it bookmarked and being able to just put the target word on the screen. So building background knowledge. Some background knowledge is absolutely essential to make sense of a text. On the other hand, reading builds that knowledge. Wide reading, especially of non-fiction texts, really matters. And it is often necessary to deliver some background before reading. Every opportunity should be taken to fill the students' heads with information, stuff that they should know. Every opportunity should also be taken to use interesting vocabulary in the classroom. So every teacher, the cooking teacher, the maths teacher, the science teacher, can all help with that. So this is an example of being able to garner background information from text. This is another Agility with Sound book. Up on the land, Mickey and Tommy set off to gather some eggs from the cliffs, some seagull eggs, gannet eggs, and maybe puffin eggs. The wind was bad, very bad. There will be no fishing today, said Mickey as he looked at the sea. It will be eggs for dinner. Now, there are other clues earlier in the book that tell you that these people are leading a basically subsistence lifestyle. But here's another clue. This tells me a little bit about how Mickey and Tommy live. It does not sound as if they run down to the supermarket for dinner. What can you work out about their lives from this? And this is from the scripted comprehension to help teachers guide students through the text. And then the second part that relates to that sentence, you may not have heard of gannets before, or for that matter, puffins. And this doesn't tell you much about them, but you can work out quite a bit if we think about it. Firstly, gannets and puffins are probably birds. If we're looking at them doing the same thing as seagulls and behaving as seagulls, then they're probably seabirds, because seagulls, we know that they lay their eggs on their cliffs, which tells us that they're ground nesting. If the eggs are worth collecting, then they're probably quite big birds, and they probably feed at sea. It's not everything about gannets and puffins, but it's quite a bit. So learning to build that information from reading and how to go about it is a really important skill. Comprehension monitoring. Comprehension is an active process. It requires input from the reader. So you can get some basic facts that may just flow into a student's head with little effort. A dog is on the mat, and I remember that a dog is on the mat. What happened next, the story tells you. Those are measurable responses, but it's not true comprehension. Competent comprehension involves a personal interaction with the text. And so you may have different students starting to visualize and imagine this. And every student will be imagining a different dog and a different mat and a different setting. Each student may predict something different happening next and find out if they're right, if that is what really happened as they read. So it's like having a conversation. In a satisfying conversation with a friend, we imagine what the speaker is saying and we picture the scene in our heads. We listen to the speaker, we add our own thoughts, it's not just one way, and we offer our own examples. In other words, we interact. Sometimes we ask for clarification. We might ask the speaker to repeat the statement or say, "What do you mean?" We may start chuckling before the punchline in a joke because we can see where this is all heading. This kind of interaction with the speaker should also be happening in reading as an interaction with the writer. And it's also like seeing the movie version. The book is the script. So to comprehend is to turn the script into a movie in your own head. To do this, you have to start imagining the characters, interpreting the events, interpreting the sentence. You must also react. Some parts may resonate more with one reader than another because it triggers different memories and different thoughts. Different readers will focus differently and choose to focus on different scenes within the movie. And so the comprehension outcomes may not and should not be the same for all students. This is my absolute favourite definition of comprehension, which I got from this novel. When you read a book, what you see are black squiggles on pulpwood or increasingly dark pixels on a pale screen. To transform these icons into characters and events, you must imagine. And when you imagine, you create. It is in being read that a book becomes a book, and in each of a million different readings, a book becomes one of a million different books, just as an egg becomes one of potentially a million different people when it's approached by a hard-swimming and frisky school of sperm. Readers don't work for writers, they work for themselves. Therein lies the richness of reading. So, fiction, most fiction narratives follow a familiar theme or a mix of themes. There's the rags to riches story. There's the overcoming adversity story. There's the good guy wins in the end story. There is the story about a powerful character with a fateful flaw, maybe jealousy or greed, a favourite theme of Shakespeare, but also of Roald Dahl. Then there's multiple versions of The Little Red Hen and so on. So when it's broken down by people who know about these things, most fiction is based on one or more of these 9 basic plots. And recognizing these common themes is a really important aid to comprehension. Recognizing them and coming across them over and over again is another consequence, of course, of wide reading. So all well-written texts have a structure. They have a beginning, a sequence of events, and what happened in the end. They may have a problem and then its solutions, which may create another problem and its solution. They may have, and in non-fiction, there should be an introduction, a sequence of paragraph, each based around a main point, and a conclusion. And recognizing the structure is key to navigating the narrative. Teaching the structure in writing helps the students recognize it in reading. And then there is the sentence structure bit, the academic structures in sentence construction. This first sentence, before Mum cooked the dinner, she sat down to watch some television. I've asked a number of intermediate teachers and intermediate students this question. If I say that, which did she do first? And the number of students that really have to think about that is really quite frightening. It's not at all instinctive. It's not a structure that you often come across in speech, but it is a structure that is frequently used in writing. And then this really complex sentence. Within weeks of her appointment, Mrs. Smith, who was selected as principal after the sudden resignation of Mrs. Brown, announced that she will be conducting weekly assemblies in the auditorium in order to create harmony within our diverse school community. Moreover, she has stated that she expects all students to participate with enthusiasm. How many of your students could make sense of that really complex sentence? But let's break them down. Let's break them down into how those sentences are made up, and suddenly it becomes easy to understand. The first thing that we need to do is figure out the who and the do, the subject and the verb. And in this first sentence, the subject is in here. She, which relates to Mum, is the subject. And what did she do? She sat down. She sat down. That's the core of that sentence. This bit over here, which starts with before and is separated by that comma, tells you when. She sat down before she cooked the dinner. Let's have a look at this sentence. And let's do the same thing. We need to find the verb and the subject. So let's have a look. Here we go. The first thing, we'll ignore this bit here for now, which is separated off by commas, which tells us it's a separate little bit, which we can come back to. We can see that the verb is announced. This is what she did. And here, who did it? Mrs. Smith announced. And then we've got down here in green, we've got two clues that tells us that there is another closely related but independent thought coming. This semicolon is one clue, and this word, this transition word, moreover, is the other. So we'll deal with one at a time. Mrs. Smith announced. The who, Mrs. Smith, and the do, the announced. And then in brown, you've got all these little bits that tell you more about Mrs. Smith and the announcing. So firstly, Mrs. Smith announced, what did she announce? That she will be conducting weekly assemblies. When did she announce it? Here, this within tells you when. Then where the weekly assemblies will be, there's that keyword in that tells you where and why, in order to create harmony within our diverse school community. So you've got a subject and a verb, and you've got clauses that tell you when, where, why, how, and so on. And then down here, with the second part, the moreover part, which is a fancy word for and, but it's a separate but added on bit. Who is she? Mrs. Smith, has stated, there's the verb, she has stated what? So we can make sense of all that. And then this little bit up here, Mrs. Smith, who relates to Mrs. Smith, and there's the verb selected. And then we've got this other clue in here which tells you when. So learning how to break a sentence down into subject and verb, and then the what, when, where, why, or how, or maybe whether, is the key to making sense of a really complex sentence like that. You don't often come across sentences that terrible, but occasionally you do, even in NCEA exams and certainly in letters from Inland Revenue. Now, teaching comprehension. First point, testing comprehension is not the same thing as teaching comprehension. So just questioning at the end or at the end of a section is testing comprehension. Teaching comprehension is questioning and modeling the thinkers of competent readers as students read. And that develops the thinking required to comprehend text. So teaching sentence and text structure also has a flow-on effect to comprehension. Many students struggle with sentence level comprehension, especially those structures that we've talked about a moment ago that are really heard in speech. So just as decoding and spelling are two sides of the same coin, so are comprehension and writing. So building comprehensions, questioning as students read, with the overall aim of teaching students to generate and answer their own questions as they read. That's teacher-led activity. Then discussion beyond the text, getting the gist, relating it to other textual experiences, forming opinions. That discussion is best done in small groups of 2 to 4 students, 2, 3 or 4 students, and then sharing it with the rest. I guess you all know that if you do a discussion with a large group, what you will have is 2 or 3 students who are active participators, a few that sit back with their minds somewhere completely different, and a few that just kind of listen in but don't actually get involved in the discussion. So discussion in small groups and then sharing the results is the way past that. And then the third research validated way of building comprehension is to write about your reading. Question, 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 discuss, 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 and write, write, write. So let's have a look at how this works. The decodable books are books that kids can read, want to read, and meet their learning needs. Words, and you can see that this one is made up of simple CVC words plus a handful of really high frequency words, said and the, so, he, she, there's another one. I think there are 7 in this whole book. So that's what they're reading. But then the comprehension script takes it a bit further. A bit of sun got onto the mat. Said the dog, I can nap in the sun. So he sat on the mat in the hot sun to nap. Now the teacher says, I'm imagining this. I think the mat must be by a window, or maybe out on a deck. What are you imagining in your head? So every student should be imagining a different scene. They should be imagining a different dog, maybe their own dog, or the dog that wanders through the school, or the one that they've seen on television. There should be a different reason for a bit of sun getting on the mat. Maybe it's a cloudy day. Maybe there's a curtain pulled across. Maybe there's a tree. So they should be bringing their own background, their own knowledge to the understanding of the story. And that is what I really like about that quote before that I read to you. In each of a million different readings, a book becomes one of a million different books. Every student who reads this little passage should have a different picture in their head, their own unique picture in their head. Another example, this is again a very basic decoding book. You can see again it's those CBC words, but this time that S suffix has been added in, and these double consonants like puff, double final consonants in basic CBC words. A few more high frequency words. So by now, these ones have been added in to those basic 7 at the beginning. So the dogs sit and puff. The dogs have had it. That is not a structure that, or a phrase that many students come across. The dogs have had it. So the script says, and you can see that it's in bold, this is a different meaning of had it than, say, had a drink. They've done a lot of running. They've kept the pig from escaping. They are puffing. Does that all give you a clue? So we're learning to figure out what that phrase have had it might mean. And then this bit, I get my bag, I cut up the pig, I get rid of the guts, I rip off a lot of the fat and so on. So he's not carrying out a trophy with the head and so on his back. Just the bits he needs. Can you tell from which bits he is choosing what he wants them for? So we're learning to predict. And then the follow-up activity at this level is visualizing, doing some basic pictures. For kids that don't like drawing, they can just do stick figures. But what you're likely to find is that many of the kids who struggle with reading and decoding are highly visual children, and they're likely, and that's one of the reasons why they're struggling, is because they've tried to make reading a visual process, which it simply is not. But being able to understand in what way dogs are like a jet, draw a picture to represent that. What does this hem the pig in the comprehension script has been through that, but this is just making sure that they understand what that means. This one that we've talked about a moment ago, the dogs have had it, and a lid on the pit, which is making a hungy. And at the same time, this breaks the whole story up into the main events and the main sections in it. But it does require the kids to think about how many dogs is it likely to be. And if you don't know anything about hunting, maybe you need to find that out. What do the dogs look like? That's up to you. What might the background scene be like? And maybe you need to find out about that. What do these phrases mean? Do you need further information to make sense of this text? Every box represents a stage in the story, so you have now summarized the plot. So it's a great deal more than just practicing decoding. So, key point, comprehension has many subcomponents, and the evidence tells us that questioning and modeling as students read is a very effective way to build the ways of thinking that comprehension involves, with the ultimate goal of students generating and answering their own questions as they read. Here's another example. This is from a book that is a little bit more sophisticated, about a shipwreck that occurred during the war off the coast of Ireland. That's what the story is based on, and how it happened and how it was a lifesaver for those villagers. It's the same story as the gannet eggs on the cliff. Then he saw it, a sub, an enemy sub, and you can see this is broken up to help the kids decode it, but next time they see it will be as one word. A little way away, but he was on track to run into it. He yelled out to the skipper. So we're in a ship. An enemy sub. What does that tell us? What is going on if there is an enemy sub? So the story doesn't tell you that it's wartime, but you can figure that out from that phrase, enemy sub. Get out of its way, the skipper yelled back. See that gap in the fog? Get the ship going that way. Hurry, hurry. And then he went on with his dinner as it was nice and hot. Strange thing for a captain to do. He doesn't seem very responsible for me. What should he be doing? Think about that and discuss it. There was a sudden gash and then a gash in the hull of the ship. The sea rolled into the hull and it quickly filled. So what has happened? Why did they not see it? And we have to go back to this to figure out why they did not see it. We may have to look back to the beginning of the story to find out whether it's more about the circumstances in the fog. And then later on in that same story, Tommy rushed to the sod hut he lived in with his mum and dad and the 10 kids in the family. Riches, he yelled, such riches, a shipwreck, boxes and chests bobbing in the sea, lots of sacks up on the sand, so much stuff. Come, hurry, we must hurry. I can imagine how he says that. He is not saying such riches, a shipwreck, boxes and chests and so on. He is in such a rush to get his message out that he is only saying the most important words. What do you think he sounds like? And the kids might need to reread that bit with a different voice. And then we'll go back to that sod hut. I've heard of that before, but I don't really know what it means. What do you think it might be like? And this a quite important bit, do we need to look it up now, or will we look it up at the end of the story? And how are we going to find it? And if you Google images of sod hut, lots of good images will come up. They all rushed down to the sand. Boxes of apples in italics, sacks of this and that, tins, pots and pans and kettles and bottles, packs of butter and battle jackets and caps, all of them soggy, but no matter, such riches. So apples is written in italics. It makes me think that apples are surprising. Surprising to who, I wonder, and why is it surprising to him? So learning more about how people live through that simple inference. And then in this story, the villagers saw they were unable to pay the land tax through the war because nobody was purchasing the bits and pieces of crafts that they were producing. And so getting a bit of cash was really desperate. But the villagers saw that after the ship had sunk with all this treasure on board, brass and copper and so on, they saw a way out of their difficulty. But the skipper, and remember it was nighttime when the boat went down, the next day the skipper and his seamen came back with a tug. Where is my ship? Where is my ship? The skipper said as he looked this way and that, at all the rocks over the sea, at all the boxes and chests in the sand and up on the hill. And then the villagers said, it is such a puzzle. It is a puzzle, such a puzzle, said one man. We did not see it happen, added the next. A riddle, I say, a riddle, said one. We cannot say. Can a ship vanish like that? Shocking, shocking. But just back earlier, and this is the comprehension script, just back here, it says they all watched it happen and saw the boat sink. And now they're all saying they do not know. Why do you think? And we have to start thinking about, why would they all be saying they didn't happen? Why don't they want the skipper to know where the boat is? And then much further on, this is a much more complex story again. Yesterday, my dad told me the story of his granddad's granddad, of how his granddad's granddad came to New Zealand. Straight away, I can see this is a long time ago. Does your mum or dad have a granddad? And his granddad? This may be 150 years ago, maybe more. So inferring from that bit of the sentence how long ago this happened. And then further on, when they docked in Dunedin, this is a story, as you can see, about gold mining in Central Otago. When they docked in Dunedin, they went to the shops to get the things they needed, and then there was no cash left. There was only one way to get to Gabriel's Gully, just as well they are fit, and had no problems with bad feet. I'm thinking that this was even before there was a road, and there are other clues in the story, not just that paragraph. What makes me think this? And getting the gold, there were nice men who Jock and Duncan trusted, but there were mean men too. Jock was always on the lookout for mean men sneaking into the tent and stealing stuff. What will we do if we get a nugget? How will we stop mean men from stealing it, said Duncan. They had to think, but in the end they agreed on a plan. And you can see that this story follows on from those EA and EE words. There you've got sneaking, mean, stealing, agreed, and so on. Like what? How could he hide it? There are not many places in a little tent. Let's watch out and see if we get some clues. And then one day, and there goes that clue, one day again, there is about to be a big change in the story. Jock was chipping away at the sand and shingle just where the track crosses the stream. Suddenly, there's that E again, suddenly there it was, gleaming in the sun, bright and golden, the nugget of his dreams. So suddenly from struggling to live, it looks as if they're going to be rich. Those words, one day, told us something different was about to happen. So that's modeling thinking, and this is questioning thinking. They had to leave the next day as there was nowhere to safely leave so much gold. You can see I'm underlining the EE and EA words. In the morning, Duncan told the rest of the men that it was too hard to get gold at Gabriel's Gully. We're going to try our luck elsewhere, he said, and the rest of the men just nodded. Was that true? That they were that they told the men that it was too hard to get gold in Gabriel's Gully? And why? And then that was the reason for leaving? And why did the men just nod their heads? Jock stitched the nuggets into the sleeve of his jacket and slung the jacket across his swag. His pockets were empty. Why did he do that? You're not told. Figure it out. If we see a man on his way to the gully, we must say that we are going back. It is too hard. There is no gold left. We must look sad. We will have to be quite sneaky, said Duncan. So that's their plan. We've figured out their plan. Is it going to work? So AWS Digital, Agility with Sound in a digital format. This is the new resource. It's all about comprehension, vocabulary development, critical thinking, and writing. It's also about speaking, listening, reading, and writing. And again, it is about collaboration, engagement, and success. And it is designed for whole class use. And it builds the skills involved up to at least NCEA level 1. So it is not a resource for kids who are struggling. I think the end of it really sets up the kids for NCEA level 2 as well. So this is what we're facing. Around 2/3 of all students in that first NCEA level, new NCEA level writing standard failed. And about a third, I think it was, that failed the reading standard. And in the lowest decile schools, 98% failed the writing standard. And it's not for lack of intelligence or potential, it's lack of opportunity. That can change. That's 98% failing at NCEA level 1, and NCEA level 2, the writing standard, is a big step up from that. And more unstructured writing about what I did in the weekend and so on will not change these figures. Students need to be specifically taught how to structure sentences, how to structure paragraphs, how to structure essays. So in the writing component, there are 2 independent strands. There's the sentence strand, which is firstly understanding what a sentence is, how it must contain a subject and a verb and must make sense on its own, and how sentences are constructed from simple to complex, simple compound sentences, complex sentences, and compound complex sentences. And it also includes how punctuation works, how tenses work, and more than that. So this is what the key thing that students need to understand, that a sentence is about a thought and everything in the sentence relates to that thought. And then what a paragraph is and how paragraphs are constructed and ordered. A paragraph is about an idea and everything in that paragraph should relate to that idea. Those 2 understandings, this one, a sentence is about a thought and how it relates to that thought. Oops. Sorry, I was trying to underline it, but a sentence is about a thought and everything in it relates to that thought, and a paragraph is about an idea and everything in it relates to that idea. That's critical that kids get that sense. So the sentence book is available as hard copy. The balance of the structured writing program, which will include the sentence book, is being trialled in several schools, and it's being offered as a subscription-based digital resource. And the whole thing is designed as probably a 3-year program. All activities are designed for small groups because peer discussion, peer inspiration, engagement, stronger students supporting others, dispersing the sense of failure. Peer discussion is such a powerful learning tool. Let's take advantage of that. So beginning with sentences, a sentence must have a subject and a verb, something that is done, or is, or has, and who or what did it. It must be a complete thought. It must have that who and do, and it must make sense by itself. And it may or may not have an object and a whole lot of other bits added on. So finding the subject and the verb. So here we've got the verb, the cried, the slept, the bit, the kicked, the chased, and we've got the subject, the baby, I, cat, Timmy, lion. Recognizing a sentence begins with identifying the verb and then the subject, the who and the do. So we have some doing verbs, the run, speak, think, and wonder. You know, verb is not a doing word exclusively. It is also the being words, am, are, is, was, were, and so on, and the having verbs, the have, has, had, and have been, and so on. And written sentences have a structure. What should and should not be included in a sentence, and how the components fit together, and how punctuation works to show those components, all follow a formula. And that formula is designed to guide the reader through the writer's train of thought. Tenses have a purpose. Mum went to the supermarket, maybe last week, maybe yesterday, maybe half an hour ago. Does not mean exactly the same thing as Mum has gone to the supermarket, which implies that she has not yet back. Compound sentences. There are only 7 words that you can use to join compound sentences. 4 of them common ones, and, but, so, and, or, but, yet, for, and, nor are also possible. Also, this semicolon. And it's learning to use all those. Timmy kicked the ball. It did not go into the net. 2 very closely related sentences which can be joined with one of these words plus a comma. Timmy kicked the ball, comma, but it did not go into the net. And that comma is really important to separate the 2 independent thoughts that are so closely related. And then complex sentences have additional clauses. A scary word, but it just means add on extras that explain why or where or how or who or when. And there are key indicators that indicate why, and some of those indicators are because or since, because he was angry, or since he was the most reliable kicker on the team. Then the ones about where, these are phrases, into, under, over, in front of, behind, between, through, recognizing that those are all signals about where. And then when, signals about when include when, while, after, before, as soon as, and whenever. And so they can be added in to the sentence explaining why, where, or when. So let's have a look at this one. These are the complex sentence. The thing that was happening is the crying, that's the verb. Who did it? The subject is the tiny baby. And when, whenever she is hungry. But we can turn that around, especially if we want to emphasize the hungry bit and when she is hungry. Whenever she is hungry, comma, the tiny baby cries. And here, Danny got is the verb, Danny is the subject, got the shot at goal, that's what he got, and why, and there's the key indicator that a why bit is coming, that word because he was the best kicker. But you may want to emphasize the reason and turn it around. Because he was the best kicker, comma, separate off that bit from the subject and the verb with that comma. Danny got the shot at goal. And so on, and learning how to manipulate these sentences and recognizing these bits, the subject, the verb, the object or the what, and the when, why, and how bits. Billy scored a sensational goal. When he got the chance can be turned into when he got the chance, Billy scored a sensational goal. Or it could be a sensational goal was scored by Billy when he got the chance, and so on. Which is the easiest to understand? Which bit do you want to emphasize? And here we've got 2 additional bits. Danny kicked the soccer ball. That's what happened. Danny did the kicking. And what he kicked the soccer ball. Where? Through the window. Why? Because he was angry. And you might want to emphasize the anger bit, in which case you might start with because he was angry, comma, keep that bit separate. Danny kicked, subject and verb, the soccer ball, what, where. And then tenses. There are 12 tenses in English, and they each give shades of meaning, and learning how to use those is summarized in 4 of these tense sheets. So there are 4 different types of tenses, and each has a past, a present, and a future version. So the sentence assignments in the sentence book are firstly about identifying the subject and verb and understanding what a sentence is. Then there's quite a bit on joining sentences, and then manipulating sentences, swapping the Y bit to the front of the sentence and so on, and how to do that. Punctuation, including as you go further through the sentence book, using that more advanced punctuation, such as semicolons, when to use in direct speech, which bits, must be followed with where to use capital letters and so on, how to use the tenses, and lots of exercises on fix-ups, on run-on sentences, and inappropriate mix of tenses, sentence fragments, and so on. Then towards the end of it, how to use those transition words that link ideas, words like therefore and moreover and so on, how to create flow within a paragraph, the cohesion, and then there are 1 good sentence challenges, just spending time to write 1 sentence really well. And it's all supported for the teacher who may feel out of their depth. Lots of teachers know what a good sentence is, but how to teach it is another thing, and why it is a good sentence as well. So lots of examples, and all the answers actually given for the teacher by underlining the verb and putting the subject in bold. Maybe it's the other way around, but whatever. It's the answers are there for the teachers. And it's been released early this year and is now being used in quite a few schools. And these are some of the comments I am getting back. Somebody said, wow, I've always gone to the internet to find ideas and examples, but here it is all in one place. I've had 2 or 3 responses like that. And I've had multiple responses saying more or less the same thing. This is exactly what I need to explicitly teach sentence structure. So that's available independently of all the rest as hard copy, and it comes with the book itself, which is 95 full-scale A4 pages. It comes with a laminated chart for the tenses, and I'm also going to shortly add in laminated charts for those transition words, and with a USB for the student activities. Now, paragraph and essay structure. Non-fiction has a prescriptive structure. Fiction, you can write, there's very few rules. You can write how you like. Outstanding award-winning writers. I've seen one book by a person who won the Nobel Prize for Literature where a sentence might go on for 5 pages, a single sentence. I've seen that same writer write a whole short book with no paragraphs. You can do whatever you like within limits, so long as it's understandable in fiction, but non-fiction is prescriptive. Each paragraph should follow the same basic format, regardless of the topic and purpose. It should be possible to summarize non-fiction texts by reading the first sentence in each paragraph. So the purpose of the structure is to make navigating the text and deriving meaning easy for the reader. So this is the structure. There is an introduction. Usually, but not always, it includes a hook sentence at the beginning, which hooks the reader in and wants them to read more. It provides some basic background information to make sense of the rest, and the main idea, what this piece of writing is about. Then come the body paragraphs that cover different aspects of the main idea in a logical sentence. There is the usually starts with the topic or lead sentence, so sometimes it's the second sentence. The topic or lead sentence, also called the introductory sentence. There's different names for that. Then expand on that with evidence and examples, possibly quotations, possibly some analysis, and then comes a concluding sentence which wraps up that paragraph and refers back to the main idea of the paragraph, and it may link to the next paragraph, create a bridge to the next paragraph. And then the conclusion, the final conclusion, it summarizes the main points made, it links back to this main idea, but it has no new information. That's the structure. So learning how to write complex sentences teaches students how to comprehend them. Learning how to structure a paragraph in writing teaches students how to navigate paragraphs in their reading for meaning. So the research evidence is absolutely overwhelming. Learning how to structure writing is a really powerful way to build comprehension proficiency. And then writing is as much about what to write as how to write it. If it is based on information garnered from text, it requires summarizing, synthesizing, choosing pertinent examples. That is comprehension. If it is not text-based, it requires critical thinking, formulating, organizing, and ordering thoughts, skills developed in comprehending text. So formal writing, meaning all non-fiction writing, is governed by rules and has the strict formulaic structure. And the point of that structure is to make following the writer's train of thought easy for the reader. The reader should be able to find the main idea in the last sentence or sentences of the introduction and in the conclusion. That's where you find the main idea. They should be able to gain a clear summary of the text simply by reading the first sentence in each paragraph, because that sums up what each of those paragraphs is about. Understanding that formula is essential for comprehension, and it's critical for writing. So writing an essay, this is based on the books and on comprehending the books. To write well, students must be able to order and organize their thoughts. This is comprehension. So reading the book and comprehending it, knowing how to comprehend it, is the first part of being able to write. They need something to write about. They need that background information, and to focus on the writing, it really helps that all that information is there in one place. The books are short, they're easy to decode with all the information the students needs for assignments in one text, and they will be exceptionally easy to decode for the most competent readers. That doesn't matter. It's giving them the information in one place. Decodability means a limited word list, leaving ample scope for vocabulary development, and vocabulary development is a major component of this resource. And to make this work, all books will be digitally available along with all the rest. So it's structured support. It starts with a lot of support, which is gradually removed as students work through the whole resource. So in earliest assignments, the topic sentences and the conclusion are provided. The topic sentence is, I've provided that for two reasons. It tells the student what is to be included in this paragraph. Here's the topic sentence. Now you provide examples and evidence. It is also the most critical sentence in a paragraph, and it is the most difficult one to get right. So in the beginning, in the very beginning, the topic sentence is provided, and the students just need to provide the detail. They are really learning what a paragraph is about. Then At the next stage, the conclusion vanishes, and the students must provide their own conclusion. They're given some clues about what it should cover, and they may even be given some sentence starters. And there is reduced support for the content sentences. They have to start figuring out themselves. And then finally, the students must write their own lead sentence. The theme of each paragraph with suggested vocabulary is provided, but that's it. By now, they should have the skills to do that. And then, of course, finally, they can write about anything on their own from any source. So all writing assignments delivered on a template that sets the structure. So the template for their planning gives the introduction, the sequence of paragraphs and the conclusion, and what each should cover and how each should be structured. So the introduction, as I said before, is about the hook sentence, the background information, and the main idea. And they're given the hook sentence. They now have to give the background information, which is a summary activity, and the main idea. The body paragraphs, the leading sentence is given to you, or may not be as you move on, and you need to expand on that with evidence, details, examples, and end with the concluding sentence. And there should be a logic to the order of those paragraphs. And then the conclusion. The main idea states what you intend to show. The conclusion does the same thing, but from the other end, it states what you have shown. So I've tried to make it as assignments, firstly, that appeal to kids, and secondly, that give different purposes for writing, compare and contrast, persuasive writing, letter writing, making submissions, a whole lot more. And the final thing I've tried to do is make it assignments that kids can see as relevant to their own lives. Lots of kids will say to you, I'm going to be a plumber, I don't need to do any writing. Well, sometimes you just might. You might have a parking ticket that you want to query. You need to be able to write about it. Several of the assignments require students to write from different points of view. So the two assignments, one looking at this issue from this point of view, one looking at it from the point of view of another character, which requires the kids to think more deeply about the contents of the books. All assignments are based on tasks students should be see as potentially relevant to their adult lives. So you might want to be a sports reporter. You need to write about this event. Or as a sports coach, you might want to write the guidelines for the team. You may want to be a scientist. You may and explain your discovery or advise the authorities what might happen. And in doing that and writing about that, you might see, I actually could be a scientist. You are the manager of this wildlife park. You need to write a pamphlet, or you need to employ somebody and you need to write the job requirements to applicants. You may need to do that too if you want to be a plumber. You are the DJ. Tell the audience about the history of this band. You are the lawyer. Convince the judge in a written statement. And hopefully students will say, I can do this. I could be a lawyer. You are a salesman. Convince this company to invest in your product. You, Joey, in year 8, this is one of my favourite ones, have been asked to advise NASA about how they could overcome the problem they have with rocket boosters being skinnier than they would like. The reasons are in the book. There are only 3 solutions. 2 of them will work, 1 of them won't. You just have to explain why 2 won't and 1 will. You need to write a letter of complaint, a submission to government, to apply for funding, even write a Facebook post. All of those, no matter what you're writing, the structure is the same, and it's all directly applicable to both NCEA and your life beyond school. So vocabulary is so important. Suggested vocabulary is there for every paragraph and every assignment. And where applicable, words are ordered from least powerful to most. You're bothered, upset, distressed, anxious, perturbed, tormented, distraught. Which one works best in this sentence? And there will be a number of words in there that some kids in your class, or maybe all kids in your class, will not know the meaning of, particularly those ones down the other end, perturbed, tormented, and distraught. So we're learning, and part of this is teaching kids what these words might mean, choosing one or two and using them, using the online dictionary to see how this word is used in a sentence, trying out alternatives. There are lots of different ways to teach that vocabulary that are part of this program. And it's not just, a classroom discussion and so on, and how to do that. And it's by learning how to pronounce and spell the new word, learning how to use those online tools to discover meaning and examples, discussion and generating and sharing your own sentences with that new word, and learning how to use that appropriate word in their writing. And it does take an average of 12 exposures to lock a new word into the lexicon, according to research. So, it's not just a quick, this is what that word means. So the first stage of this new resource begins with how to write simple and compound sentences, which will take you about a third of the way through the sentence book. And then introducing the books from level 2 and 3. Dead easy decoding, very, very easy. But they introduce the basic structure of an introduction. They have 2 or 3 body paragraphs and a conclusion, and really hammer the idea that a paragraph is about one idea and begins with a lead sentence. The lead sentences and the conclusion are provided, modeling those components of good writing. Every paragraph is a list of suggested vocabulary. And while they're doing that, they should also be following on with further activities in the sentence book up to about 2/3 of the way through, so that they're prepared with more complex sentence structures for the assignments in the next stage. Those early assignments are heavily supported, and that support is gradually removed as they gain competence. But the earliest ones, the body paragraphs, are really easy. One is about the problem, the next one is about the plan. The first one is about advantages, the next one is disadvantage. The first one is about before, the next one is about after, and so on. It's really, really basic. So the village activity, the shipwreck, the villagers knew what had happened to the ship, but the skipper did not. One writing assignment from the skipper's point of view, the other is from a villager's perspective. And the students must consider what each character knows of the whole story and what each character wants others to know and what each character doesn't want others to know as well. So it's extending comprehension beyond the text with lots of inference and critical thinking. Then in the second stage, books and writing from level 4 and 5 are introduced. These further develop the structure of the body paragraph. The lead sentence with exporting detail, expand on the lead sentence, giving reasons, supporting facts and examples, the what, the how and the why of the lead sentence, and a concluding sentence. I've given suggested lead sentences, but students must write their own conclusions. They are also introduced to the notion of varying sentence structure within a paragraph, and they learn to avoid, wherever possible, repeating words within a paragraph. And that is supported by synonyms in the vocabulary list. Again, every paragraph has a list of suggested vocabulary. Some of them will be words that the students know. Some are words that many students will not know, and how to teach that. And then they work through the sentence book to the end to prepare them for the third stage. Are you certain that every sentence is in the correct paragraph? This is a checklist at the end of each assignment. Does every sentence in the paragraph relate directly to the first lead sentence? Does your conclusion reinforce your main idea in the introduction? Is every sentence a complete sentence? Have you got the punctuation correct? Do you have commas where they are needed? And at the same token, not where they are not needed. Do you have any run-on sentences or sentence fragments that need fixing up? Have you used at least 2 different sentence types in each paragraph? Have you repeated the same word unnecessarily in a single paragraph? Where the same word has been used twice, is there another way of wording it? Have you checked that spelling of any words you are not sure of? And then when we get to the third stage, added into that will be, does your sentence flow? Is it clear, the link between this sentence and the next sentence, and how all that works? So these books and writing are from the level 6, 7, and 8 books. They introduced a much more sophisticated paragraph structure. Students mustn't now write their own lead sentence. They need to then add relevant supporting detail and examples and evidence, a little bit of analysis and how this relates to the main idea, and a concluding sentence, often introducing the theme of the following paragraph. They need to write their own lead sentences. They need to give particular attention to coherence and cohesion within sentences, between paragraphs, and that is further developed in this stage. Every paragraph, again, has a list of suggested vocabulary. So some examples. This is one of the beginner ones from a level 2 book called A Pet Fox, which is all about how cute little foxes are, and how utterly endearing they are. But at the same time, keeping a pet fox has its downsides, particularly their need to scent mark everything from all the neighbours' letterboxes to the linen in your cupboard, and how they need to dig, that instinct to dig a den. And if nothing else is available, they'll dig a den on your bed, digging right down through the mattress to make a den in there. So this is one of the activities. There are 2, but this one is about creating an advertisement, which involves summarizing and evaluating. Your task: you have some fox cubs to sell. You want people to buy one, but you do not want them complaining and bringing them back. You will need to put a big emphasis on the advantages because you're trying to persuade, but you will also need to mention the disadvantages too. You don't want to put people off, but nor do you want angry people sending them back. What could the pet owner do to lessen the problem? Provide a cage outside, a digging spot in the garden? Any other ideas? So the thoughts are there. You have to put it into words. So this is the introductory sentence. The sentence that hooks the reader in has been done for you. You need to add some background information, perhaps that foxes are like small dogs and that some people keep them as pets. Are they becoming popular? The last sentence is your main idea, that you have some for sale. And here's some words that you might lose. Popular, fashionable, they're words most students are likely to know, but cherished and endearing, they may need teaching. Introduction, what you have for sale. And this is the template for the planning. And that lead sentence has been done for you. In the first, in the introduction, the hook sentence has been done for you. Are you looking for an unusual yet charming pet? And there's your planning for there. The first body paragraph covers what you are selling. We have several cubs for a new home, and then some detail. And this is what the detail will be. You expand on that lead sentence. This should answer the questions what, why, and how. How many cubs do you have available? How old are they? Are they male or female? How much do they cost? You'll need to make that bit up. You want to make some money, but if they make them too expensive, you might find them hard to sell. Again, some words that you might use. The next body paragraph is here, why someone should buy them and what the big advantages are. Foxes are both playful and entertaining. That's why you should buy them. Here, this should answer the questions of what, why, and how. What will you really enjoy about owning one of these cubs, especially if you have more small children? And some suggested vocabulary. Because they're little, they may be quite economical, not eat nearly as much as a big dog. And then body paragraph 3, what your customer will need to be warned about and how they can lessen the problem. And you've been given some clues earlier on in the introduction about putting a cage outside or providing a place outside where they can dig and so on. And then the conclusion is done for you. This one is further on. This is about pufferfish. And the story about pufferfish is how a pufferfish has two main ways of keeping safe in the sea. And one of them is it's deadly poisonous. But not the whole fish is deadly poisonous. And in some places, pufferfish is a delicacy in high-class restaurants, especially in Japan. But by golly, the chef has to know what they're doing with it. He really does not want to kill off his customers. So your report writing. You have seen pufferfish on the menu at a restaurant. You're worried that the chef does not know the dangers of serving this fish to the public. You decide to write a report telling him and other chefs what he needs to know about this fish. So the lead sentence has been done for you, and this is the lead sentence. Pufferfish live in warm oceans, usually close to the coast. Then you need some background comes next. The reader will need to know what a pufferfish looks like. That is usually an ordinary looking fish. The final sentence is your main idea, in this case that they are not as harmless as they look, and it could be dangerous if the chef does not know what he is doing. That's all you should say in the introduction. The detail comes in the body paragraph, and some words that some kids will know, others won't. Most kids will know unremarkable and dangerous and deadly, but hazardous, innocuous, innocent even. Some kids may later learn the meaning of fatal. Choose a couple to teach. And then the next body paragraph is about how the fish defends itself in the wild. This fish defends itself in two interesting ways, and that is summarizing the content of the book in a very short space. So putting in that detail, this is your planning sheet, how the fish defends itself in the wild. So I need to go back to here. No, I don't. Yep, there's the introduction, there's the body paragraph, and there's the planning sheet. And now we're moving on to another one. This is from a story about once upon a time, using shags or cormorants with a ring around their neck were used by fishermen in many parts of Asia to catch fish. The fish the shags were trained to dive into the ocean, bring back a fish, but with this band around their neck, they were unable to swallow them. So they were used much as farmers use dogs to round up sheep, I suppose. But they're now mainly a tourist attraction. It's not a method that is used commercially anymore. So you have seen, as a tourist, you have seen fishermen using shags to catch fish. You think it is cruel and unnatural, and you want to see this practice banned. You decide to set up a petition, getting as many signatures as you possibly can to present to the authorities. You hope that this will mean that training shags to catch fish will be outlawed. And a proviso, you cannot make claims that are simply not true, that the shags are punished if they do not catch enough fish, for instance. You can't do that sort of stuff. Your petition will be rejected if you do. You can, however, express an opinion in order to persuade people to sign up, that wild birds should be free, for example. You will want to persuade people to think like you, that this is cruel and should be banned. So the lead sentence is about the lead sentence. Well, I'm going straight to the first body paragraph here. The introduction is covered as well, of course. Expand on the lead sentence. How are eggs taken from the nests and the chicks trained? So this is the first sentence, and some words you might use. And then at this stage, they're using a concluding sentence to that paragraph. This sentence summarizes the paragraph and reminds the reader of its main point. You could reword the lead sentence to show this, or perhaps summarize the content of the paragraph. You could start the sentence with the mother bird is, or the chicks are, or something else. So this is another one, Salimon. This is the life cycle of a salmon. Nobody gets that Salimon is salmon. And this is reports writing and summary. Now, the story is about the life cycle of the salmon and how they hatched at the breeding ground at the top of a river, and as they age, they swim down, feed in the sea, come back as adults to lay eggs at that same spawning ground, always at that same spawning ground. But there is a problem, because people want to build dams on the river, hydro dams and so on, and how are those salmon to get up the river? Well, there have been solutions, fish ladders and so on, and that's covered in the book. Your task, you are a scientist. You have been asked to write a report for the Electricity Commission explaining the effect building a dam on the river will have on salmon. You have been asked to explain the problem so that all members of the Commission understand, and to recommend solutions that will work. That's all in the book. Note, fish ladders and spillways have previously been constructed, not just in New Zealand, but in other parts of the world as well, especially in Canada. These fish can leap up small waterfalls is well documented. So, body paragraph 1, explain how salmon live and why getting up and down this river matters. So, salmon are born in the headwaters of the river and spend much of their life at sea. And then now you have to summarize that life cycle in the book in 2-3 sentences, and then have a concluding sentence that summarizes the whole paragraph. Diving with a manta ray, this is much more advanced one. This is the story of a diver who freed a salmon away from a tangle of fishing net that was around one of its fins, and how that manta ray recognized that diver, and a special relationship developed between them. And this can happen. This really can happen, that manta rays recognize individuals and will develop a relationship with them. So this diver was able to ride on the back of a manta ray, which is a huge, huge ray, might be 3 meters across or more, and follow the manta ray through its stay. So your task this time, the filmmaker and you, his producer, so you're the producer of a film, are planning a film film, and you need to decide which bits of footage should be included and what can be left out. It is to be a short 10-minute film. You both want the world to know and care about mantas and see them saved. You want the film to be about the relationship between this diver and this manta ray. And a lot of the book covers the relationship between manta ray and other smaller fish in the ocean. That's not what this piece of writing is about. You have to leave that out. The theme of this film is about the relationship between the ray and the diver, the man and the fish. You may mention the other fish in passing, but that is not what this film is about. But you need money. You need to write to a wealthy individual or the film commission explaining what you want to do and why. Your letter will need to be clear, concise, and to the point. Give details of what you want to cover in the film. You will need to explain how you envisage the film, which bits of footage you plan to include, and briefly explain why. What will the opening scene be? The shot that really grabs people's attention. This will be covered in the hook sentence. So as you can see, they now have to write their lead sentence. They need to write their supporting detail with evidence and examples, possibly some analysis, and their concluding sentence. So the first body paragraph, not the introduction, is about how this relationship began, how the diver and manta recognized each other, and what happens when they meet. So it's about quality rather than quantity. It may take several lessons for a group of 2 or 3 students to write one piece well. It may take one lesson to write one paragraph really well. Choosing your words really carefully, structuring the sentences really carefully, getting the very best examples, using the very best vocabulary. So it is about building skills and about understanding the writing process. It is about being concise and relevant to the point. Every word matters. It is about structure and quality. It is not about quantity. So this is the pricing. A school-wide license is based on the number of students in that school in years 5 to 10, and it will be $15 per eligible students, which means for year 1 to 6 schools, it's for around about a third of the role, which doesn't mean that if teachers in year 3 and 4 can see some use for it, that they can't use it as well. So in years 1 to 8, it's half the role. For years 1 to 13, it's around 2/3 of the role. Intermediate and middle schools, it's the whole role, and so on. But you don't have to buy the whole lot, and most of you won't. For one term, if you just want a trial, it's 40% of the total, and that's if you buy all levels, which is $6 per student. For 2 terms, it's 80% of the total, and you may want to focus on writing in terms 2 and 3, for instance. If you want to buy one level of the 3, it's 40% of the total. That's for a whole year, $6 per student. You may want to buy one level for one term, which is $2.40 per student. So the books, you can see snippet views are available on the Agility with Sound website. You just go to the Buy AWS bit, scroll down to Books and Kits, hover over a cover image, and you'll see a page view, so you can get a fair idea. I've tried to pick pages that are fairly representative of what the story is about, and some contact details.